Let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the apostasy comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction. 2 Thessalonians 2:3. I believe that there is a strong possibility that 2 Thessalonians 2:3 is speaking of the rapture. What do I mean? Some pre-tribulationists like myself think that the Greek noun apostasia, usually translated apostasy, is a reference to the rapture and should be translated departure. Thus, this passage would be saying that the day of the Lord will not come until the rapture comes before it. If apostasia is a reference to a physical departure, then 2 Thessalonians 2:3 is strong evidence for pre-tribulationism. The Greek noun apostasia is only used twice in the New Testament. In addition to 2 Thessalonians 2:3, it occurs in Acts 21, where speaking of Paul it is said that you are teaching all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake apostasia Moses. The word is a Greek compound of apo, from, and istemi, stand. Thus, it has the core meaning of away from or departure. The Liddell and Scott Greek lexicon defines apostasia first as defection, revolt, then secondly as departure, disappearance. Gordon Lewis explains how the verb from which the noun apostasia is derived supports the basic meaning of departure in the following. The verb may mean to remove spatially. There is little reason then to deny that the noun can mean such a spatial removal or departure. Since the noun is used only one other time in the New Testament of apostasy from Moses, Acts 21:21, we can hardly conclude that its biblical meaning is necessarily determined. The verb is used 15 times in the New Testament. Of these 15, only 3 have anything to do with a departure from the faith. Luke 8:13, 1 Timothy 4:1, Hebrews 3:12. The word is used for departing from iniquity, 2 Timothy 2:19, from ungodly men, 1 Timothy 6:5, from the temple, Luke 2:27, from the body, 2 Corinthians 12:8, and from persons, Acts 12:10, Luke 4:13. It is with full assurance of proper exegetical study and with complete confidence in the original languages, concludes Daniel Davy, that the word meaning of apostasia is defined as departure. Paul Lee Tan adds the following. What precisely does Paul mean when he says that the falling away, 2:3, must come before the tribulation? The definite article that denotes that this will be a definite event, an event distinct from the appearance of the man of sin. The Greek word for falling away taken by itself does not mean religious apostasy or defection. Neither does the word mean to fall, as the Greeks have another word for that. The best translation of the word is to depart. The Apostle Paul refers here to a definite event which he calls the departure, and which will occur just before the start of the tribulation. This is the rapture of the church. So the word has the core meaning of departure, and it depends upon the context to determine whether it is used to mean physical departure or an abstract departure such as departure from the faith. The first 7 English translations of apostasia all rendered the noun as either departure or departing. They are as follows: Wycliffe Bible, 1384, Tyndale Bible, 1526, Coverdale Bible, 1535, Cranmer Bible, 1539, Breach's Bible, 1576, Beza Bible, 1583, Geneva Bible, 1608. This supports the notion that the word truly means departure. In fact, Jerome's Latin translation, known as the Vulgate, from around the time of AD 400 renders apostasia with the word decessio, meaning departure. Why was the King James Version the first to depart from the established translation of departure? Theodor Beza, the Swiss reformer, was the first to transliterate apostasia and create a new word, rather than translate it as others had done. The translators of the King James Version were the first to introduce the new rendering of apostasia as falling away. Most English translators have followed the KJV and Beza in departing from translating apostasia as departure. No good reason was ever given. The use of the article. It is important to note that Paul uses a definite article with the noun apostasia. What does this mean? Davy notes the following. Since the Greek language does not need an article to make the noun definite, it becomes clear that with the usage of the article, reference is being made to something in particular. In 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 3, the word apostasia is prefaced by the definite article, which means that Paul is pointing to a particular type of departure clearly known to the Thessalonian church. Dr. Lewis provides a likely answer when he notes that the definite article serves to make a word distinct and draw attention to it. In this instance, he believes that its purpose is to denote a previous reference. The departure Paul previously referred to was our being gathered to him, and our being caught up with the Lord, and the raptured dead in the clouds, notes Dr. Lewis. The departure was something that Paul and his readers clearly had a mutual understanding about. Paul says in verse 5, "Do you not remember that while I was still with you, I was telling you these things?" The use of the definite article would also support the notion that Paul spoke of a clear, discernible event. A physical departure, like the rapture, would fit just such a notion. However, the New Testament teaches that apostasy had already arrived in the first century, and thus such a process would not denote a clear event as demanded by the language of this passage. Understanding departure as the rapture would satisfy the nuance of this text. E. Schuyler. English explains as follows. Again, how would the Thessalonians, or Christians in any century since, be qualified to recognize the apostasy when it should come, assuming, simply for the sake of this inquiry, that the church might be on earth when it does come? There has been apostasy from God, rebellion against him since time began. Whatever Paul is referring to in his reference to the departure was something that both the Thessalonian believers and he had discussed in depth previously. When we examine Paul's first letter to the Thessalonians, he never mentions the doctrine of apostasy. However, virtually every chapter in that epistle speaks of the rapture. In these passages, Paul has used a variety of Greek terms to describe the rapture. It should not be surprising that he uses another term to reference the rapture in 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 3. Dr. House tells us, "Remember, the Thessalonians had been led astray by the false teaching that the day of the Lord had already come." This was confusing because Paul offered great hope, in the first letter, of a departure to be with Christ and a rescue from God's wrath. Now a letter purporting to be from Paul seems to say that they would first have to go through the day of the Lord. Paul then clarified his prior teaching by emphasizing that they had no need to worry. They could again be comforted because the departure he had discussed in his first letter and in his teaching while with them was still the truth. The departure of Christians to be with Christ and the subsequent revelation of the lawless one, Paul argues, is proof that the day of the Lord had not begun as they had thought. This understanding of apostasia makes much more sense than the view that they are to be comforted because a defection from the faith must precede the day of the Lord. The entire second chapter serves to comfort, supplied by a reassurance of Christ's coming as taught in his first letter. Since pre-tribulationists believe that the restrainer mentioned in verses 6 and 7 is the Holy Spirit and teaches a pre-trib rapture, then it should not be surprising to see that there is a similar progression of thought in the progression of verse 3. Alan McRae, president of Faith Theological Seminary, in a letter to Schuyler English, has said the following concerning this matter. "I wonder if you have noticed the striking parallel between this verse and verses 7 to 8, a little further down. According to your suggestion, verse 3 mentions the departure of the church as coming first, and then tells of the revealing of the man of sin in verses 7 and 8. We find the identical sequence. Verse 7 tells of the removal of the church. Verse 8 says, "And then shall that wicked be revealed." Thus, close examination of the passage shows an inner unity and coherence if we take the word apostasia in its general sense of departure, while a superficial examination would easily lead to an erroneous interpretation as falling away because of the proximity of the mention of the man of sin. Kenneth Wuest, a Greek scholar from Moody Bible Institute, added the following contextual support to taking apostasia as a physical departure. "But then he, apostasia, of which Paul is speaking, precedes the revelation of Antichrist in his true identity, and is to katakon, that which holds back his revelation. The he apostasia, therefore, cannot be either a general apostasy in Christendom, which does precede the coming of Antichrist, nor can it be the particular apostasy which is the result of his activities in making himself the alone object of worship. Furthermore, That which holds back his revelation is vitally connected with Hu Kei-chun, he who holds back the same event. The latter is, in my opinion, the Holy Spirit and his activities in the Church, all of which means that I am driven to the inescapable conclusion that the he apostasia refers to the rapture of the Church which precedes the day of the Lord, and holds back the revelation of the man of sin who ushers in the world aspect of that period. The fact that apostasia most likely has the meaning of physical departure is a clear support for pre-tribulationism. If this is true, Dr. Tim LaHaye and I believe that it is, then it means that a clear prophetic sequence is laid out by Paul early in his apostolic ministry. Paul teaches in 2 Thessalonians 2 that the rapture will occur first, before the day of the Lord commences. It is not until after the beginning of the day of the Lord that the Antichrist is released, resulting in the events described by him in chapter 2 of 2 Thessalonians. This is the only interpretation that provides hope for a discomforted people. Maranatha, come Lord.